Hi, we are here in the beautiful Longevity Center in Warsaw, and today we're hosting Mario Martinez, an expert in leadership and organizations and a neuropsychologist. We want to talk today about leadership and resilience. Mario works for Fortune 500 companies to train leaders in the area of leadership and sustainability. Mario, you do so many different things because you represent several fields of study. But for the purpose of that conversation, how what you do will help us to understand better leadership resilience, the way we build it and then the way we maintain it?
Well, we have really good news from neuroscience. We know a lot about the brain now and how to actually maximize, when we're talking about resilience and sustainability, how to maximize that, and especially for leaders, is very important because you not only want to have resilience, but you want it to last. Yeah. And you want it to last in a way that, that is productive, in a sense, and that is healthy. So a combination of those two things is really what I do when I work with leaders and teach them how to maximize the resilience that they have, and I'll explain that later, but also how to sustain it.
Yes. Absolutely. So when we talk about resilience and leadership resilience, I represent university and I teach in executive MBA programs. And there's such a big curriculum of less or more heavy subjects. I've never seen any subject that would refer to health and resilience that would help managers, future leaders be healthier and more effective. What are we missing in those programs?
I think you're right. In the United States, the same thing. They're not bringing in health experts who know organizations and who know health, who know wellness. And health is just the absence of illness, but wellness is more. Wellness is health with meaning, the value that you give to things. So you're right, it's missing, and this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to bring to MBA programs this concept of neuroscience, so that then we can apply it in a way that whatever model that we bring, a business model, that is compatible with the wellness of the individual, both the leader and the people that they're working with. Yeah.
So if we were to introduce a new subject, and have a revolutionary executive MBA program now for leaders, or any training, maybe not executive MBA, but a good training for leaders, what the subject would be and what it would include?
Well, if I go to an MBA program, I'll ask, what is your model? What is your curriculum? And how can we bring in the consequences of your curriculum in maintaining wellness and maintaining especially resilience and sustainability in what we know about the brain? We know about how the brain responds to new information, how it responds to stress, how it responds to creativity, but also to adversity. This is very important. And that's not taught, unfortunately, in most MBA programs. I don't know any that actually teach that in the way that I'm talking about it.
And even if they tackle stress, because it seems that stress is one of those issues that appears from time to time. What are we doing right and what are we doing not right to address that issue with regard to leadership efficiency and resilience?
Well, the first thing is that in science, there's a lot of studies on stress, but not too many studies on what increases wellness. And one of the things that needs to be looked into is that stress is very contextual. So if you and I are talking about resilience, and that's a context, and the brain will adjust to that. But if a tiger comes in, then you have all kinds of stress reaction, unless we're talking about how to tame a tiger. Then the tiger is not as stressful anymore. So one of the things that we teach in leadership is the contextual meaning that we give to stress, number one. Because if you give it, this is bad, the brain will do something. This is an opportunity to learn, the brain will do something else.
So do I get it well, that stress with meaning is less harmful than stress without meaning?
Yes, actually stress with meaning is good for you.
Because it's mobilizing.
Yes.
It can be.
And it's creativity. You need, the stress is a way of activating. It could activate the good or activate the bad. You can't have, for example, studies with rats show that when rats are not stressed, they get sick. And stress is stimulating. How can I stimulate you with a challenge? If the challenge is meaningful, it's good. If it's not meaningful, it's bad for your health and for your productivity or for your output.
When you say meaning, what do you mean exactly? It's the meaning of work that you do? It's the meaning of the life that you have?
If you want to look at meaning in anything, look at value. Is this valuable? It's got meaning. If it's not valuable, it doesn't have meaning. And value is very, very important. So for example, you are walking by a pier and your cigarette lighter falls and you think that there may be some sharks there, you're not gonna, because of the value of the cigarette lighters. But if your child falls, the value, you go and you risk your life. So value is a very important component for wellness and for resilience, especially value. And so we ask ourselves, does this have value? And one thing that's happening in the United States and other places too, is that after COVID, people had to really reevaluate their mortality. And they asked themselves, does my job have meaning? And many people have quit their jobs even without having another job because of that. Because they asked themselves, what is the meaning of what I'm doing? What I was doing had no meaning. I can't do it anymore. And that's good because that increases your health.
So what are the questions that leaders or future leaders could ask themselves to increase the meaning in their life?
If you get up in the morning and you're not excited about the day, there's no meaning.
Okay.
That's it. You get up and, I have to go to work. Forget it. If you get up, I can't wait to go to work, there's meaning. And Steve Jobs talked about that very much. He said, if you don't have meaning, there's no passion. And there's no passion, there's no creativity.
So you can survive, but you cannot thrive, a word that you like to use.
That's right. You have to, you can survive and you can do well, but you don't change the world. When Steve Jobs was trying to get an executive from Pepsi to work for him, he wouldn't do it. He couldn't do it. So finally he stopped him and he said, do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life or do you want to change the world with me? And he said, how can I not answer that question? So that he's talking about meaning, value.
Before our conversation here, we spoke about the special Google that we can develop to help leaders to work on their mindset.
Yes.
Tell me more about it.
The neuroscience tells us that we have what's called a default mode. The default mode is the goggles that we use to look at the world. And if it's blue, light blue, dark blue, but all are blue. What we want to do is we want to take them off and say, oh, that's blue, that's red, and those are contexts. So what you learn is that you want to deal with the context of what's going on. If there's a context here where you have to be authoritarian, fine. Here you have to be consensus, micromanage. And the problem is that if you use one for all, our brain wasn't made that way. The brain was made to define what's going on based on the context. And that alone will help you tremendously in changing the goggles of just looking at the world like in a fishbowl. The fish don't know they're in a fishbowl, that there's a world out there.
It's interesting because you said that authoritarian. I think that you can be authoritarian in circumstances that require you to be authoritarian, because when you have a big crisis that is happening and you need quick decisions, you need to be in authority to enact it. But you cannot be like that all the time because it's unproductive and unhealthy to you.
Exactly, because if you have a crisis, you're not going to look for consensus, because the crisis will overwhelm you. You're authoritarian. But if you don't have a crisis, then consensus to a certain degree. In other places, there has to be micromanagement to see if the method is working. But the key to remember is all of them are important. None of them work in all the contexts.
Absolutely.
None of them. And if you break that, then your efficiency goes down. Because it wasn't made for that. The tool is for this, but not for this. A hammer is to hammer, but not to screw.
Exactly. So the goggle would be like a new software that we insert to. How can we understand the Google?
To see that the way we look at the world, there's no objective world out there. We have an interpretation of the world. And once you take that off and you say, well, rather than this is the world, this is the context that I'm going to be looking. The context will tell you what you need. If you're with a child, the child will tell you what they need by the needs. If you're with an adult in a crisis, they'll tell you what they need by their behavior. So my advice would be, if we begin to look at things contextually, it takes you out of the tunnel vision.
And to be able to do it, we really need to come to the context, incredibly curious
Yes.
and open-minded,
Yes.
not with ready to apply solutions.
That's
and
right.
with the old way of seeing, because otherwise we'll just impose it on
Absolutely.
what it is.
The curiosity is very important, and I try to bring Socrates into management. If you want to know what's going on and you're a leader, you don't go to a person and tell them what they need. You ask them, tell me what's going on. With patients, for example, they have an illness, I'll ask them, how do you see the illness? What's the narrative? Because you find out how their world works. So if I ask, how do you see this? How do you see that? Where do you think things didn't work? I'm diagnosing and I'm thinking of your phenomenology, and then I can bring in something. But you never, I suggest that never go into something without asking questions, because then you're not a good leader.
So if we diagnose leadership resilience now, what would it be? What does it need to have?
Okay. It's very important to define resilience, because we talk about it, but from the brain side, resilience is simply the amount of time that you take to come out of adversity. Some people take 2 hours, some people take a week. Or never. But you don't want resilience only. You don't want to fall and get up and keep going. You want resilience and thriving. So after you come out of uncertainty, then curiosity has to come in. How can I do this differently? Not, I'll never do this again. No, how can I do this differently? And where do I need to pay attention to new information? That would be the thriving.
I actually like the fact that you are combining resilience with thriving, because I usually hear about it in the context of surviving and thriving.
That's right.
As if resilience is a complete state.
That's right. It's just a part.
And it's just part of something greater.
Yes. And in the US, most of the research has been done with thriving. In France, the French psychology, they're using it thriving and or resilience and thriving. And now the US is using it too, but you're right, it's a two-part thing. Here's resilience and here's thriving. If you find resilience without thriving, you don't grow. You just get up and you clean up and do it again. But with thriving, there's a mindfulness that you bring and you say, how can I learn from what happened here? That's extremely important.
And our attitude to change.
Yes,
I understand it's also a big thing in terms of how resilient we can be.
Yes, and that's where flexibility comes in. Flexibility is to ask yourself, how can I learn from this? As opposed to I have all the answers. Or I don't want change. Because if you're afraid of change, you're going to be rigid. Change is not going to happen. And you notice that sometimes the older generation, they have an iPhone, but they hit it like a typewriter. That's bringing in the old method. Or if they're talking on the phone, they'll scream, because many years ago, long distance, you had to scream. So we bring our cultural history in, and leaders have to be very careful not to impose their history, but to see what is needed in the environment that they're leading.
Yeah, and when I think about change, I don't think people fear change, really, because when they get a better apartment and a newer car, they're pretty happy with the change that they have. When I think about fear of change, I think about people fear loss. It's really because if change is good and you get stuff or not lose things, then you're not fearful of change. But people are fearful of what can they lose, either realistically or just potentially, and that's what blocks them and diminishes their resilience. And
also the creativity component and fear of change is learned. From your parents, they teach you, don't take a risk here, don't take a risk there. So as a leader, you have to take intelligent risk. And you could fear loss of control, but you can fear having to deal with newness. And sometimes when a person doesn't have good self-esteem, the worst thing that could happen to them is good news. They can't handle it because it's too good. Again, the value. If you don't have value and something good happens to you, it's like watching a lion coming toward you.
Yeah, and that fear produces mental rigidity, about which you talk so much.
Yes. And something that I notice in leadership is that when people are getting ready to retire, many of them go into what I call retirement consciousness. And if you're a leader in retirement consciousness, you're not going to make many changes. You're going to say, I have two years to go. Let's not rock the boat. Let's just not, a new idea, no. Because and those people need to be removed very quickly or trained. They're very difficult to train people who are into retirement consciousness. But when that happens, then you see the creativity going down, you see the resilience going down, because the leader does not allow much change. They want to keep it the same way so they can retire and go fishing.
Yeah.
And they die 4 years later, by the way, because they lose meaning.
So the meaning, whatever we talk about, whatever subject we tackle, this meaning is really underneath.
That's the key terrain.
That's the key ingredient, if we can say, of this wellness.
Yeah.
One of the things that is so associated with fear is uncertainty and the fear of uncertainty. How would you tackle that? Because it's a big part of resilience,
yes.
Leadership and non-leadership resilience.
Well, as you know, culture is very important to me. So if you're looking at uncertainty in Poland, is different than uncertainty in the United States or the Philippines, because whatever has happened to a country creates the avoidance of uncertainty, and the risk-taking goes down. Yeah. In countries that have not had the Nazis, and then they have a more willingness to take risks. So that has to be retrained. You have to retrain in that when there's uncertainty, is uncertainty something that I should be afraid of, or should I welcome it as an opportunity for change? And recontextualizing it. And it takes training. Now you can't do it intellectually. But once you do, then someone will say, oh my God, look what's happening. This is terrible. Oh, what a great opportunity. And that has to be trained in a leader. Because
there is so much opportunity and possibility in uncertainty.
That's right.
When everything is certain, things get rigid in a way and much less creative.
Yes.
Maybe safer, but in the long run, not necessarily.
No, that's right.
It's really,
And look what happened with COVID. Many companies realized that they don't need to have a lot of offices, that they can work from home. Zoom went up very high with the stock because if we hadn't had Zoom or Skype or things like that, what do you do? So I think that uncertainty always brings an opportunity to move to the next level, or to become more rigid. And you have a choice, more rigid or more creativity.
So if you look at the individual leader, how can we help working with leaders as neuropsychologists or executive coaches like myself? How can we help them handle uncertainty?
Well, yes, because uncertainty has its own parameters. What happens with uncertainty is several things. One, you're no longer able to predict. You lose your predictability. Two, you're no longer able to function with the old model. So, for example, uncertainty could be good and bad, and it has the same reaction. So, for example, let's say that you're an executive and you get fired. Okay, you have to give up the rituals from work. You have to give up your plans for the future. You're going to be there for many years. But the same thing now with a positive. You're an executive and you're going to be making twice as much in another country. The same thing. You have to give up the rituals. You have to give up the expectations. So it's not good or bad. It's just how you handle the situation. And one of the best ways you can't predict the future. When people say in the foreseeable future, that doesn't exist. What can you take to the future? As much as you plan A, B, C, and then X comes in. The only thing you can take to the future that you can cultivate in the present is your creativity. If you say, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know I have my creativity, the future is not something of uncertainty. If you try to plan everything, obsessive about planning everything, something else comes in, you're lost. So what I suggest with leaders is to cultivate your creativity in the present so you can take it to the future.
And believe that you are resourceful enough.
That's right.
Not that you have resources, because sometimes you may not have resources, but that you are resourceful enough that you will manage.
Exactly.
Whatever happens.
And we use a technique to teach people how to actually create neuromaps of creativity. And that is that you have them to go back, and in a state that we teach, when was the last time that you were creative and it worked for you? And you embody that sense, that feeling. Why? Because when you do that, you create neuromaps of creativity and you become easier at being creative. Because the brain doesn't pay attention to what you say, it pays attention to what you do. Exactly. So it has to go back to the evidence-based that, oh, last time I was creative, this happened. Okay, I have evidence that I'm creative. So I don't worry about the future. I make plans, but if something unknown comes in, my creativity comes in to take care of it, and I trust my creativity. The resilience goes up immediately because then you come out of chaos faster. but also you come up with something new that you hadn't thought about before.
Yeah. So if we were to give the leaders or future leaders that are maybe watching or listening to us the final word about resilience and thriving, somehow now I think about them combining them both. What would you like them to remember?
First, that resilience will show you how much strategies you have to come out of chaos or come out of uncertainty. And then you ask yourself, okay, this is the level this is how long it takes me, but how do I cultivate thriving after I find the resilience? And here's where sustainability comes in. If I learn to cultivate my thriving, that automatically creates sustainability. And the question, sometimes you look for some people without thinking, they look for sustainability of the mediocrity.
Yes.
Or sustainability of let's not make any changes. That's not good sustainability. Sustainability is you had abilities here and they're better in the future and better and better. That's the sustainability we're talking about. The sustainability with a sense of greater understanding and greater thriving and all that. So as you know, that it's not just the sustainability, but what do you want to sustain?
Yeah.
Mediocrity or brilliance?
Yeah. So that really concludes beautifully, because leadership is about doing progress on difficult tasks and difficult challenges. And we don't want a lot of dead bodies around. Yes. We just want people to survive, but also thrive afterwards, exactly. Even if that was difficult work that they had to do.
That's the message.
That's the message. Yeah. Thank you so much,
You're
Mario.
welcome. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Thank you.